The nervous system. A primary specialist of the medical specialties is the neurologist. Neurologists are medical doctors who complete an additional 5 years of specialized training in the prevention, diagnosis, and treatment of disorders and conditions related to the brain, spinal cord, nerves, and muscles. Some procedures related to the nervous system are lumbar puncture. A neurologist may order this procedure to test cerebrospinal fluid, or CSF. This procedure is recommended if they believe symptoms are caused by a problem in the nervous system that can be detected in the cerebrospinal fluid. The procedure involves inserting a needle into the spine after numbing it and taking a sample of cerebrospinal fluid. The Tensilon test. This procedure can help a neurologist diagnose myasthenia gravis. In this test, the doctor injects with a medicine called Tensilon. Then they observe how it affects muscle movements. Electromyography, or EMG. An EMG measures electrical activity between your brain or spinal cord to a peripheral nerve. This nerve is found in your arms and legs and is responsible for muscle control during times of movement and rest. EMGs can help your neurologist diagnose spinal cord disease as well as general muscle or nerve dysfunction. Electroencephalogram, or EEG. With electrodes applied to your scalp, an EEG measures electrical activity in the brain. It is used to help diagnose conditions of the brain, including inflammation, tumors, and injuries, as well as seizures and psychiatric disorders. Some nervous system vocabulary. Afferent nerves are nerves that carry signals or nerve impulses toward the CNS from the periphery. And aphasia is loss of language function. Arachnoid matter. Middle layer of the meninges named for the spider web-like trabeculae that extend between it and the pia mater. Astrocyte. Glial cell types of the CNS that provides support for neurons and maintains the blood-brain barrier. Autonomic nervous system, or ANS. Functional division of the nervous system that is responsible for homeostatic reflexes that coordinate control of cardiac and smooth muscle as well as glandular tissue. Axon, single process of the neuron that carries an electrical signal or action potential away from the cell body toward a target cell. Axon hillock, tapering of the neuron cell body that gives rise to the axon. Axon segment, single stretch of the axon insulated by myelin and bounded by nodes of Ranvier at either end, except for the first, which is after the initial segment, and the last, which is followed by the axon terminal. Axon terminal, end of the axon, where there are usually several branches extending toward the target cell. Axoplasm, the cytoplasm of an axon, which is different in composition than the cytoplasm of the neuronal cell body. The Babinski sign, dorsiflexion of the foot with extension and splaying of the toes in response to the plantar reflex, normally suppressed by corticospinal input. Bipolar, shape of a neuron with two processes extending from the neuron cell body, the axon and one dendrite. The blood-brain barrier, the physiological barrier between the circulatory system and the central nervous system that establishes a privileged blood supply, restricting the flow of substances into the CNS. The brain, the large organ of the central nervous system composed of white and gray matter contained within the cranium and continuous with the spinal cord. The brain stem. The region of the adult brain that includes the midbrain, pons, and medulla oblongata and develops from the mesoencephalon, metaencephalon, and myeloencephalon of the embryonic brain. Broca's area. The region of the frontal lobe associated with the motor commands necessary for speech production and located only in the cerebral hemisphere responsible for language production, which is in the left side in approximately 95% of the population. Brodmann's areas. Mapping of regions of the cerebral cortex based on microscopic anatomy that relates specific areas to functional differences, as described by Brodmann in the early 1900s. Cauda equina, the bundle of spinal nerve roots that descend from the lower spinal cord below the first lumbar vertebrae and lie within the vertebral cavity, has the appearance of a horse's tail. The caudate. The caudate is a nucleus deep in the cerebrum that is part of the basal nuclei. Along with the putamen, it is part of the striatum. Central nervous system, or CNS. The anatomical division of the nervous system located within the cranial and vertebral cavities, namely the brain and spinal cord. The central sulcus, the surface landmark of the cerebral cortex that marks the boundary between the frontal and parietal lobes. The cerebellum, the region of the adult brain connected primarily to the pons that developed from the metencephalon along with the pons, and is largely responsible for comparing information from the cerebrum with sensory feedback from the periphery through the spinal cord. Cerebral cortex. Outer gray matter covering the forebrain, marked by wrinkles and folds known as gyri and sulci. Cerebrum. The region of the adult brain that develops from the telencephalon and is responsible for higher neurological functions such as memory, emotion, and consciousness. Cerebral hemisphere. One half of the bilaterally symmetrical cerebrum. Cerebrospinal fluid, or CSF. The circulatory medium within the CNS that is produced by ependymal cells in the choroid plexus filtering the blood. The choroid plexus is a specialized structure containing ependymal cells that line blood capillaries and filter blood to produce CSF in the four ventricles of the brain. The corpus callosum, large white matter structure that connects the right and left cerebral hemispheres. The dendrite, one of the many branch-like processes that extends from the neuron cell body and functions as a contact for incoming signals or synapses from other neurons or sensory cells. The descending tract, the central nervous system fibers carrying motor commands from the brain to the spinal cord or periphery. The diencephalon is the region of the adult brain that retains its name from embryonic development and includes the thalamus and hypothalamic. Direct pathway. Connections within the basal nuclei from the striatum to the globus pallidus internal segment and Substantia nigra pars reticulata, that disinhibit the thalamus to increase cortical control of movement. The dorsal or posterior nerve root. Axons entering the posterior horn of the spinal cord. The dura mater, the tough, fibrous outer layer of the meninges that is attached to the inner surface of the cranium and vertebral column and surround the entire CNS.